Ryan here with E39 Source. That's my 2005. Thankfully, we're not working on that car today. We're working on this one, another 2005. So we're dealing with a problem today that has happened before, not to me. It's fairly common in these E39s that a door gets stuck shut. And it's stuck shut because something inside the door has failed. Now, this isn't the door. We can see the car's locked. All of the little plungers in there are down, indicating that the car is locked. I'll hit the button on the key, and the way this one's configured, it unlocks the driver's door. I'll hit it again, and we can hear that the passengers, all the passenger doors opened as well, and that lets us inside the car. We look at the door latch. This moves up and down. When it's in this mode, you can manually open it with the lock or with the latch. This is how it's supposed to work. Now, unfortunately, here the rear right door is not working like that, and as you can see, all the other doors are unlocked, but this one is still pushed down, indicating that it's locked. Obviously, attempting to open the door from the outside handle will get us nowhere. We can come in the car and pull the latch, and that linkage is still good, and it even pushes the little thing up, but it won't open the door. So you could try to hold on to that and then open the door, but it's too smart for that. That doesn't work. So I think what has failed here is the actual electronic latch actuator inside the door. Now, about a year ago on my M5, I did the actuator on my front passenger door, and I knew that it was getting to a failure point because as I would press that button in the center console there on the right, that was the last one to lock and unlock, and it was slow, and about once every 50 times it wouldn't work. And then you would hit the button a couple more times and it would work. So let me close that door, and obviously what's supposed to happen is there's lock and there's unlock, and you can hear these things. They're pretty loud, and there's just no noise inside this right rear door. So I think we've got a dead motor that is trying to open that isn't. So how do we open a door that's completely stuck shut? Well, it's going to suck, it's not going to be comfortable, and it's not going to be fun, and it's probably not going to be pretty, because we need to remove this door panel with the door shut. And obviously they're not designed to be removed that way, but it can be done that way. Now, thankfully, this is a rear door and not a front door. The front doors are a little bit more complex. There's more going on in there. The window regulators are bigger, etc. But the front doors are held in part on the door panels, rather, are held in part to the chassis by a little black screw that is up there by that vent and speaker. And I'll show you in case it's one of your front doors that's stuck shut today. In which case, I wish you the very best of luck. But that screw that you're not going to be able to get to is in here. And I forget which way you have to orient you have to orient it that way. Orient it shut, and if you look in there, there's a tiny little black Phillips head screw, and obviously if the door's stuck shut, you can't access that, so unfortunately you will be breaking the plastic in and around this vent. Now, thankfully, those are pretty common parts. You could rob one from any 5 Series door or buy a new one for $83,000. It's up to you. The rear doors have no such trickery. It's fairly simple. There's one fastener, metallic fastener, holding these doors on the car, and it's hidden behind that little cap inside the door handle. Use a pick tool or a tiny little screwdriver and pick that plug out, and then depending on what year your car is, you will be presented with either a black Phillips head screw or a T20, T25, something in that neighborhood, torque screw. You'll remove that. You'll push the handle back behind this leather. There's no need to remove the wood trim. I don't believe there's any fasteners back there. There's nothing down here. And then your electrical connections will be a speaker here. And in the bottom, you have, of course, your puddle light. So be careful with those when we do eventually get the panel loose. And I suppose we'll say it at the top here. The first things that you want to try, if you dare, is, for lack of better terms, pretty much just spamming this button. Depending on how long it's been that your door's been stuck shut, if it hasn't been long, maybe it just happened. You know, if it's freezing cold outside, let things thaw out. Maybe it's just frozen, or maybe try some warm water in and around the window. That's not the case here. It's 75 degrees outside. I don't know how long this particular door has been stuck shut, but what we can do is just press the lock button a whole bunch of times. And unfortunately, you can't go very quickly because it won't let you. But sometimes exercising them will bring it back. Unfortunately, that is not our case today. So we will be proceeding with removing the door panel from inside of the car. The first step to doing that will be removing the bottom seat cushion, which is very easy. Doesn't matter what interior you have. You're just going to put your hand here, give it a good tug up. Generally, I would have you open that other door and do it that way. But over here, we'll just reach inside the car, give that another tug, and then you're going to pull it kind of towards the front and up, and the entire seat will come out. That's going to buy us some room. Then we're also going to move the passenger seat all the way up towards the dashboard. Both the bottom cushion and the backrest. That's going to give us as much room as possible for the minutes to hours that we will be spending in there today. We've got the bottom seat cushion removed, the front seats all the way up and forwards. That buys us some space. Now I'll just show you on this door because it'll be a lot easier, but as I mentioned a few moments ago, there's a black cap behind the handle. I'm going to use a 90-degree pick tool as such to remove that, and I'll show you what's in there in a moment. This April of 2000 car has a Torx 20 or 25 in there, so I assume I'll find the same thing on the other side. We'll remove that screw and I'll show you what's next after that. The screw is out, and that's going to be the only metallic hardware holding the door panel in. I mentioned before electrical connectors are going to be the light at the bottom, the speaker, I forgot the window switch. So, you know, 3 connectors that once we get the panel loose from the door, we'll have to be careful with. I've read a couple of things about this online. There's not a lot. This is my first time doing it this way. If you have the rear sunshades and you have this little quarter shade here, that needs to come out next. And I've taken a couple off parts cars. I do not remember exactly how that's done, so I would search for a tutorial online if you haven't done it before and don't know how. Otherwise, just figure out how that comes out and carefully do so, because if yours works and you break it, that's very expensive. So with the handle screw and plug out, the handle itself is now very loose. And once we get the door panel loose from the door, we're just going to turn it kind of like that, and then push it through the hole, and that's going to stay on the metal part of the door when we get the panel loose. What's holding the panel on the door right now are a series of plastic clips around the perimeter, about every 2 or 3 inches around the entire perimeter of the panel. There's a yellow or white clip that holds it into the door. So we'll need to very carefully pry it away towards me. Just pulling on it is really the best thing we can do. We have a point to pull here with the handle, and then we have another point to pull down here. Now, if you haven't noticed, these are full leather sport Silverstone door panels, which this car is one of 85 for the North American market. It's an exceptionally rare 2000 model year only kind of interior. So if I screw up this panel, we're in bad shape. So I'm going to be as absolutely careful as I can here. The things that I have read online say that it's helpful to remove this black, or maybe yours is chrome, piece of trim up here at the top. And I don't know that that's going to be completely necessary, because as I've removed these panels before, that can stay on the door, and the door panel itself, in fact it's already starting to in this corner, just peels away from it. Now we will have to lift up and out to clear this latch that's stuck down, or this lock that's stuck down, but I'm going to pull and twist and push and see what happens here. If I'm not getting anywhere, then maybe we'll try to remove that next. As I suspected, this upper piece of trim can stay on the door. Kind of what I did here was using the handle and the little mat pocket. Also, if you open up the ashtray and you can pull out, if you push in there, you can pull out the actual ashtray. Then that gives you another point of pull where you can use your hand. Now, don't do what I did and break the ashtray. There's this little black piece of trim in front of it. And if you pull on that, it snaps off. I'll replace that shortly. I have some spares around here. That was the damage I did to the door panel, which is a lot less than it could have been. So the other point of contact that, of course, I forgot to mention is hiding here in the shadows. Let me get a light. And it's this little prong that sticks out below the door handle. It's metal, and it goes into a little acceptor thing on the back of the door panel. Now, this can work one of 2 ways. It can slide off as it's designed, or you see that middle piece is kind of a prong within the prong. If that starts to bend and stick up, which I've had happen before, in this situation it's going to be really hard. If your window still works, roll the window down. You're going to want to look in between the metal door and the leather panel. Look for that prong, and you've got to push it back down, because it becomes too fat. If this bends the wrong way, it becomes too fat and it won't let go of the door. And if you pull it, you're just going to break it. So you really need to take the time and figure out how to compress this thing enough so the door can slide off of it. Now, I got it to release over here first, all of these pop rivets around the perimeter. Then I worked on the top, pulled it away from this piece of trim. Make sure you're not just pulling away the vinyl or the leather, depending on your panel, but the actual, looks like cardboard, particle board back behind it. So make sure it all comes apart. And then the last thing that holds it on is going to be this latch, and you're going to go up and then slide it out, and just hope you don't damage it too much. So now we're looking at the door itself with the airbag in place. Before we touch that, we're going to disconnect the battery, take a 10 mil, remove the negative battery cable in the trunk from the battery, because we will have to remove and disconnect the airbag. In fact, this one isn't even plugged into anything like most of these cars. They came with them, but they weren't actually hooked up. This is the wiring for it here. But still good practice to just disconnect the battery, be safe about it. The door panel, or the door vapor barrier here, is held onto the door with butyl tape. It's really sticky, black, goopy tape. You can see there how sticky it is. We're gonna have to peel all of this away once the airbag is out. The airbag's just held in with, I think they're 10s, 3 10mm bolts. So we'll remove the airbag. The handle comes out like this. See that green part? I'll show you the back of it. It's got a sheathing around it that sits in a groove in the handle. So what we need to do is take the handle, pull it away, then that allows the sheath to pop out, and now it's just a hook and a matter of sliding the handle off of the hook. Sorry for the bad camera work here. I'm in a dark hole by myself. So that's how the handle comes off. We can leave the latch. I already did the wiring. When you get it pulled away a couple of inches, just reach back there and push the window switch out, disconnect it, put the switch back. Same thing for the puddle light. And then the speaker was a green connector that just plugged into this little connector here. So I'm going to remove the airbag and the vapor barrier, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of the door. This is the back side of the door panel. The prong that I mentioned that could get stuck is on that. And it goes inside of that black little body nut, as I'll call it, and if it gets too wide, then it can't clear that hole. Now this whole thing can slide down and out of the panel. So if you were in a way that you could just slide the door up, this could stay on, slide the door panel up, and then the black plastic piece could stay attached to the door inside the car. That might be your hack. Now I just removed this entire map tray here. I'm going to scrape all that old glue off, get a new one, and just replace the whole thing. Otherwise, 8 of the 9 clips around the perimeter of the door panel were broken during that removal, so I'm going to replace all of those now. Boom, door's open. Okay, what do we have to do? So I talked about the airbag, I talked about the vapor barrier. Get that out of the way. The next step is the wiring harness that connects to the electronic actuator here in the door. And it's easy to find. It's the one that, it's got 3 wires. We got a blue, a white, and a black. It's right here. There was another clip that I think was in this hole that I just pulled out. And then it's one of these slidey connectors. So when it's installed on the actuator, it's like this, right? And then you've got to get a little flathead screwdriver in there to pry that black part away like this, and then it will pull off of the actuator. Now, when you do that, let me actually switch to the iPhone, because I think we're going to have better macro here and the LED light. All right, so the white part at the top with the prongs, that is the actual electrical connection on the actuator. Now, the video I found stated that we needed to fully remove the actuator inside the door to be able to find the right piece to push. And I found that to not be the case. So as I said, we need to disconnect the wiring. Then I'm gonna go ahead and put this back, and it's still messed up right now. Like I'm pushing it down and it's springing back up. But what I was able to do was with a flathead screwdriver, and I can't see it now because it's already pushed out of the way, but there was kind of a golf club shaped gold prong, and I just decided to give that a push with the screwdriver. And as I pushed it, this sprung open. And the first thing I did was switch the key on, roll the window down, reach outside, and open the handle, which looks like that. And the door has opened. So I don't know exactly what it's going to look like for you. I wish I could show you the right part in there that I pushed, but it pushed and then sprung somewhere else out of the way. So I'll show it to you when I get this whole assembly out. In order to replace the lock actuator, we're going to need to take this entire assembly out, which is held in by a number of Torx connectors or Torx screws. I think this is a 30, maybe this one holds it. That looks like another 30. And then 2 more over here by where it meets the chassis and latches on. So at least those 4, I'm going to take those out and we'll see how loose this gets. So I went ahead and removed those 4 Torx 30s, and it's exceptionally loose in here. The only thing that's holding it in is the Bowden cable there with the little red part on it down to here. So we need to remove the cable or just disconnect the cable. That's what connects the outside door latch to this locking mechanism. And it's kind of a 2-piece thing that holds it in there. So step 1 is going to be the red part that's going to slide up, and that will free the cable. I'll need to get some tools in there and have both hands available to do it. And then at the bottom, the white part there, can you see it? It's kind of a hook tool that we're going to need. We're going to need to pull the cable towards us a couple millimeters, and then it's going to fit out and around the latch. I can almost do it with my fingers. So we just need to pull the cable this way, and then that's going to allow it to free and pull out, and then we should be able to release this entire latching assembly from the car. All right, guys, I'm really going to try to get this on camera. So here's the tool I'm going to use, just a pick tool, to grab the Bowden cable from behind, and we might rough it up a little bit here, but that's okay. Just don't break it. Pull it towards us. Kind of a brute force method of doing it there, but that worked. So we just needed to get that angle right, because there's a bit of a hook and a channel in the piece that it connects to. And remember, we're going to have to put this back together. So that's probably will be a little bit more challenging, but we've completely freed the cable now from the latch assembly, as you can see, which is just falling out of the door. So I'm going to roll this window up, get some more space in here, and we'll take it out completely. Okay, I lied. There's one more thing holding this entire assembly to the car. That's another Bowden cable. This one goes to the green part, to the hook, the interior door release handle. And it's just held up in the chassis with kind of a yellow clip that would need to be pinched together and then pulled out. But I'm not even going to bother with that. I'm just going to work on it from here as is. So this black part on top with the BMW picture, that is your lock actuator. In my case, that is what has failed. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that and replace it. And this bracket on the side is what holds it on. So we'll just fish a screwdriver or a pry tool in between these 2 items, separate them, and then it'll spring off. Then I'll show you how complicated and tricky that thing is underneath. Yeah, the Germans don't overcomplicate anything, do they? So this is a rear door latch mechanism. And what I pushed there is kind of the brass colored piece closest to the camera. And once I gave that a kick, it unlocked this rod, which unlocked the door, as I said before. So the old actuator is here. I'm assuming it's just got a bad motor in it. I've already got a new part down there. VDO is the original equipment manufacturer for BMW, so that is what I would recommend. Now, we need to be a little bit careful when installing it. Now, there's 4 pieces here. 2 of them move and 2 of them are stationary. The ones that are stationary are on the far outside. So that would be this guy and this guy. These do not move. They're part of this metal housing. The pieces that move are this as an unlock rod, and I'm not even sure what this other little piece is here. But they need to fit inside the bottom of the actuator. See the piece that moves in the middle? You can kind of see a spring. That piece is what the motor drives, which is responsible for locking and unlocking the door. So inside of there will go this. That's what moves. The club foot thing is going to fit in the wider openings on the top right or bottom right, as you see it in this view. And of course, we want to keep our electrical connector facing the way it was before on the passenger's door, facing that way towards the front of the car. So I'm going to reassemble this, and we're certainly going to test the hell out of it before I close this door again. So the actuator is installed, ready to be tested. When you put the wire and connector back on, you've got to make sure the black part slides all the way out of the way so the little pegs fit, and then as you push it down, you'll slide the black part back over to lock it on. Now, it installs a lot closer to that little bracket on the back that we played with before than you think. The 2 stationary rods that don't move fit in very narrow holes that they will only fit in those holes. So it'll be pretty obvious when you look at the bottom of this actuator and the top of the latch to see which way it's going to fit on there. So now it's in there. We're ready to give it a test. Well, how do we do that? I'm not going to close this door yet. I don't trust closing this door. So what I've done is just shove a screwdriver or two or whatever it takes inside of this latch. There's a little trip in there, and when the trip is pushed, the car thinks the door is shut. When the door is shut, it will actuate the locks. It will not do that if any of the doors are open. So the other 3 doors are shut. This one is open, but it might as well be shut because we've tricked it. So now what we can do is come over to the center console and press the button. And I wish I had another set of hands today. I unfortunately don't, but of course we'll have to reconnect the battery for this. Now, I'm going to say this. If you have rear airbags and they were connected, these were disconnected. I showed you the wire was over here, the airbag was over here. So if you have rear airbags and they're still connected, at this point you need to plug your airbag back in before you plug the battery back in. Reason being, you'll get an airbag light. It's going to look for resistance. If there's no resistance, it thinks the airbag is blown or not there or something's missing, and you'll have a red light on the dash. Since this airbag wasn't connected, the car doesn't know it's not there. Anyways, I'm going to press the button, and I can hear that it's working. And I'm going to set the camera up now in a way that you can see that thing move when I actuate it. And we have success. So at this point I'm going to remove the tools from there as to not mar that up any more than we need to. And we're ready to put everything back together. So the actuator's installed, it works. Essentially, we can just put this thing back in there the way it came out, which is probably a little bit trickier than taking it apart because now it needs to go back exactly the right way. Vapor barrier's back in, the rear airbag is back, the door handle is almost installed. I just need to put the door panel on and then the handle. But putting the vapor barrier back on, that could take you anywhere from 40 seconds to about 4 hours, completely depending on how well you want to seal it. I would recommend sealing this very well. You hear people all the time complaining about wet door panels, wet carpeting in the rear, the seat's wet. This is why. The vapor barriers on these cars, the butyl tape that BMW used 20 years ago, dries out. Water gets in the door, as is normal, and then it leaks through. Or it runs down the window and it leaks through, and then it gets all over your interior, and that's no good. So I used to use like an RTV sealant, and I'd go to Lowe's, and what a freaking mess that was. That would take forever to dry. It makes a huge mess. It's not the right product. Use the butyl tape. You can go on Amazon, find whatever. It doesn't have to be BMW brand, but the BMW stuff is this super sticky black butyl tape that I'm seeing we're completely out of focus. You could use it to catch flies. I mean, the stuff's just like thick rubber gum. It's a pain to work with. I generally scrape most of it off of the door, use a plastic pry tool, and then I try to pick most of it off the old vapor barrier, and then just run run the tape along the perimeter of where it used to be on the vapor barrier, push it in place, and then I use the handle end of a screwdriver to just go and push everything nice and tight. So I guarantee this thing's watertight now. I put the airbag back. I'm doing a couple of repairs on the door panel over there. I've got some C-clamps regluing some of the leather on there where it was starting to come loose. So I'm going to let that dry overnight, and then tomorrow I'm just going to reinstall the panel. Firstly, starting with the wiring. That's for the puddle light, the window switch, and the speaker. Then you're going to want to feed this through the little hole, and then you pretty much just line it up, flip it over your door lock. It's a little bit easier to install if you move that down to the lock position. Line everything up, and then just smack it with the palm of your hand. Make sure that all the pins are lined up, or the clips are lined up in their holes, and smack it on, and you're good. You're done. That's how to remove a door panel from inside the car, the vapor barrier down to the lock actuator, replace what's broken in there, and put it back together. Now let's say maybe you have a completely different issue and you can hear your lock actuator is firing but nothing's happening. That means you've got broken linkage somewhere. You have a bad cable, a bad rod, a bad spring, something in the door is wrong. If you can figure out how to get it open to take it all apart, great. If not, follow my steps, and keep me in mind for parts. You guys, I don't know, most of you have seen the recent dozen videos or so, but I've parted out 4 E39 M5s at this point. We've got parts out the wazoo in here. I've got an engine available still. Interior parts are inside. And I have these latches and these cables and these actuators and these handles if you want to go in a used route. In fact, I was able to use, this is a rear left, but I was able to look at this and see, get an idea for what this thing looked like inside the door before I was able to get it out and actually see it in person. So very helpful. But that is the DIY. We'll talk soon, and you guys will definitely be seeing more of this beauty. Take care.